Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The time is 7 p.m. and the date is Tuesday, May 11, 2021. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates, the alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Present tonight are Ms. Lisa Carson, Ms. Kay Towsley, Mr. John Goodekunst, and alternates as of right now is Mr. Robert Delac, who will be a voting member tonight, replacing board member Mr. Joe Kraus. I am John Goldsey, the chair. Also present, we have the zoning administrator, Mr. David Riggs, and Secretary, Ms. Carrie Yake, as well as the government channel team. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The applicant or their representative will give reason why the appeal should be reviewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the applicant or their representative will offer concluding summary or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code Section 230703B, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare is secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code Section 230710C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. And these criteria are exceptional circumstances, practical difficulty and due hardship, preservation of equal property rights, minimum variance, absence of detriment, and not being a general nature. Any person, resident or officer, department or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. There's only one case tonight on the agenda, and that is with respect to property at 280 East Estate Street. The board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda, please confirm that you swear or affirm that the testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please unmute your microphone and state yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We assume anyone that is talking tonight on behalf of the appellant or from the public is under oath. Okay, let's go to this case. It's case 21-4V for variance. The property is at 280 East Estate Street. Zone is B1. Mr. Trent De Bruin is the applicant or appellant, and Mr. Montel is the owner. Correct? the appellant is requesting a variance from ACC 23-1001 to allow a front setback of 8 feet where 25 feet is required, rear setback of 5 feet where 30 feet is required, right side setback of 4 inches where 8 feet is required, a structure coverage of 40% where 30% is required, and a variance from ACC 230401 to allow 8 units where 1 unit is permitted. We're going to go to the code office. Any questions for the code office before I ask mine?
I do have one question, John.
Go ahead, please.
And that is simply, it appeared in some of the supplemental documents that there was also a total lot coverage of 90% where 60% is required. Should that be included in the variance request?
Mr. Riggs?
Yes, that is the case. Total lot coverage of 91% where 60% is required. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Riggs, the way I understand for B1 neighborhood zoning, the B1 is essentially a residential area that supports some kind of a business that will be supplying commodities or performing services for the immediate neighborhood. And then those are defined to be what kind of a businesses they are. The other thing that I was looking at, this is section 230404. Residential uses. So if a residential zone is adjoining this B1 zone, then the same rules applies as there in this zone. Am I correct?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting case. This is an existing structure that is currently a business use. The appellant has asked for a change of use, which includes both business and apartments. And when you do that, that's correct. That is permitted as long as it meets any residential use that abuts this zone. It has to meet all of those requirements. And so in this case, this property abuts an R1 zone. And so the restrictions apply, including the only thing that's allowed in an R1 zone is a residential 1 family or 1 housekeeping unit. And they're asking for 8.
And to your knowledge, do you know of any multifamily in the neighborhood in the R1 zone, which is building the B1 zone?
No, not to my knowledge, not multifamily in the R1. No.
Okay. All right.
Is the R1 zone across the alley in the back?
It's on both sides. Yes, it's behind the alley, and it's also across from State Street. So there's a little island of B1 completely surrounded by R1 here.
Gotcha.
Any other questions for Mr. Riggs? Okay. The appellant, please state your name and your address for the records and also your case.
Hello, my name is Kurt Montel. I'm the resident at 74 Elmwood Place on the Near East side of Athens. On behalf of my family's small business and our architect, Trent DeBruin, I'd like to thank you for taking time to consider our proposal for the development of 280 East State Street.
Did you swear in to tell the truth and all these things?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Because I saw another person, but let's go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Our goal is to add value to the community by developing a currently vacant rear commercial unit. By maintaining the same building footprint and adding a second floor to the rear of the building, we can provide 8 residential units and 2 commercial spaces. The variance we're asking for is nothing more than what neighboring properties have in the same B1 district. At 282 and 284 East State Street, Mr. Larry Young has a mixed-use development with residential units on the first and second floors and also commercial spaces on the first floor. The property mirrors the same use that we are proposing. At the corner of Madison and East State, Diversified Properties has multiple residential units in a B1 zone while being surrounded by an R1 neighborhood. I humbly ask the board to allow our property to enjoy the same rights as these neighboring non-conforming properties have. The 8th loft-style apartments are intended to serve the young professional and retiree population. The 3 apartments on the first floor are all ADA accessible units. Details of this proposed development fall in line with many of the recommendations from the 2012 Low-Income Housing Needs Analysis, including the non-student oriented housing. It's close to transit stops. I would actually propose moving the bus stop to in front of our property and work with the city to install a bus stop shelter. It's nearby to community service providers. It is infill housing within the community fabric and has ADA accessible housing. The front of the building and the exterior Art Deco facade will not change. The wall height of the rear of the building will only increase by 5 to 6 feet in height. In an effort to reach out to the community and ease any concerns, I did post the complete application on the Near East Side Facebook page. I'm happy to say it garnered 34 likes and even some hearts, which I received as positive feedback. I'm not even sure that the return of Clementine the cat to its home received that much positive feedback. Nonetheless, in all seriousness, I have reached out to adjoining property owners. Mr. Darren Leatherwood and I had a great discussion on his front porch, and we do plan to implement his concerns with our building application, which would include minimizing balcony size to reduce occupancy, looking at adding a green space along East State in order to be able to plant and create a privacy screening, and also to review parking needs of the community. Thankfully, we have plenty of parking for this project, so that's a major plus, as we all know. Once again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the appellant from the board?
I was wondering if you said a more residential aesthetic on the second floor there. So facing the people in the back who live in the back, who have these kind of gardens back there, are you going to have any balconies looking down upon them? We got one letter about this from a woman back there, and she didn't specifically mention that. But are they going to be looked down upon by someone on a balcony or anything like that?
That's a good question. The word "look down upon" I don't think I would use.
I know. Sorry.
If you can see in your mind that general property area, actually the houses are at a higher elevation than what our property is, as they are up on is that Madison, I believe. I forget which street is behind us. I can look. Nonetheless. Yes, each second-story apartment, we intend to have a balcony, not only for the enjoyment outdoors for the tenant, but also for safety concerns in regards to being able to exit the structure in multiple ways.
Any other questions? Okay, in that case, let me go in there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request? Will be heard now. Do we have anyone? Please raise your hand if you need to speak. Okay. Is there anyone wishing to speak in general comment? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this proposal? Okay, no one online, but we have two letters in here that I'd like to read for into the records. The first one is from Ms. Cynthia Wallace Love, and she says, as a Patton Street resident, I request the appeal to be denied for the variance of front, rear, and right side setbacks of 280 East State Street. I also request the appeal for the variance from ACC 230401 be denied for this property. This is an R1 residential zone, of course. She meant probably where she is, but it's a B1 zone, one family, and should remain as a residential area with this zoning. I have lived in this neighborhood for 18 years and purchased this property on 3 Patton Street due to the residential zoning. Police denied this appeal, so this community may remain R1 residential zone, one family as it was intended. And then the other is an email from Ms. Deborah Crabtree. To whom it may concern, I am writing this email on behalf of my 86-year-old mother, Catherine Crabtree, the property owner of 277 East State Street. She is not able to send the email herself, and I also am her power of attorney. These are her thoughts. Her father built the house at 277 East State Street, and Catherine Crabtree was raised in that house. And her granddaughter now lives there. This is a family neighborhood with mostly owner-occupied single-family housing, and Catherine does not want rental property or renters encroaching. Kurt Montel bought the Larry Conrad building across the street, 280 East State Street, and wants to build several apartments and one business in that space. Mr. Montel is also buying up property in the near east side and turning those properties into rentals. That is very concerning. As stated before, this is mostly owner-occupied single-family housing in this neighborhood. If he wants to buy, build rentals, take it to a neighborhood where it is zoned for rentals, and don't turn the family neighborhood of the near east side into a lot of rentals. Catherine would like Kurt Montel's request for a variance denied. Thank you for your consideration. Would you like to address these two emails and letter?
Sure. Actually, can you enable me to share my screen? Is that possible?
How to share your screen should be at the very bottom. If you put your mouse toward the bottom, there should be a green box that share screen, and then you have to click again to share. If there's any more instructions, Scott, please help us out. Okay, we see something.
All right, you see something there?
We see something, but not quite what we want to see. Bunch of numbers.
Bunch of numbers.
I can see it.
I can zoom in a little bit. Maybe that would help. Is that better? Unfortunately,
That's good.
It must be my computer then. I see a bunch of boxes, little boxes with writings in it.
Correct. So what this is an outline of the community that we are discussing today.
Okay.
So I'd like to address the concern of rental units. Step number one, I think we should step back a little bit. Rental units are, please correct me if I'm wrong, permitted within an R1 district as a definition of an R1 district, as long as we meet your definition in code. But nonetheless, what I would like to do is point out what Mr. Trent DeBruin, our architect, has identified as rental units in this general area. By accessing the city database, he's provided this layout of how this current community feels and what rental units actually exist. And where my hand is here is where 280 State Street is. As I expressed, within this B1 district, at 282 and 284 East State, by Mr. Larry Young, he currently enjoys the same opportunity as we do with a multi-use facilities here with residential and commercial spaces. As you can see, each unit that's identified as rental units are currently rented out and listed with the City of Athens. Where I'm moving my hand over here, currently at the corner of Madison and East State Street, is where Diversified Properties was permitted to provide a multi-residential unit as surrounded by the R1 district. I understand the voiced concerns of your constituents, but my reply would be is that if these two properties are currently permitted to be used in this manner, I do not believe that our property varies in any way from their use. I'm more than happy to answer any questions in that regard.
Well, first of all, I personally don't know the circumstances of these two properties. I don't know what neighborhood they have, what R zone they are building, or when this was granted. We look at each case by itself, independent of the others. And as of right now, what I see is that the property as is has been utilized in the past. And so the property can be used as it is. Now, you want to add 8 units in there. That's what we are discussing. We are looking at this case just by itself. And the board members can comment on that as well if they want to.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that idea. So the B1 zone that rental property he was talking about on the corner of Madison is in the same zone that the property he wants to develop is. And that was 3 or 4 years ago, I think, approved, I assume, for a variance. You probably weren't on the board then, and I certainly wasn't. So I don't know if we have any history we can pull up on that, but it was developed in the recent past and allowed to have multifamily housing in that location that are rental. So I think he's correct in that regard, and I think that's relevant here because, like he said, I think when his opening statement, that the other properties, some other properties in the area were already granted some of the rights he's requesting here. And that seems to be the case with that one example, and then maybe the one next door as well. I'm not sure more details about that, but and that may have been grandfathered in too. It looks like it's been occupied as a rental for a long time.
Kindred Market has, what, 8 rental units in there, or 6? Is it above the Kindred?
I didn't know that.
I knew someone who had a rental.
Kindred has apartments on top.
Uh-huh.
Then it goes back. You got to enter from the side of the building.
Yeah.
Yes, Lisa, go ahead.
My question, Mr. Montos, I think, has referred to a couple of properties that he says enjoy the privilege that he's seeking, but there are so many rentals on this map. I wonder if David Riggs knows if most of those were grandfathered, or why there are so many rentals there.
So some of this is located in a R1 zone, and some of it's located in the B1 zone. If you so like behind along behind East State Street, you see some rentals here. Rental permits or rental units are permitted in an R1 zone, and just as they would be in this B1 zone here. But what I think the code is trying to do is trying to match any residential use in a business zone that would match the neighborhood. So rental permits or rentals are permitted in an R1 zone. It's here we're just discussing the number of units that's permitted for this code.
Thank you.
Mr. Riggs, is there any verbiage in there about going up?
So if, let's say, for instance, this B1 zone abutted a R3 zone, multifamily residential zone, that wouldn't be an issue then for us, because multi-units would be permitted in there. So it would be if it's a butts, and it has to be the most restrictive. So if you had an R3 and an R1 that abutted a B1, you'd have to go with the most restrictive, which would be R1. Here in this case, we only have the R1 zone, so that's what we fall back to. Was that the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the code, the B1, and it does say there under, let's see, sorry, under residential uses, so this is 230404A4, it actually says the regulations of the least restrictive resident zone shall prevail.
There's only R1 here. We don't have any other R's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Gotcha.
That's okay. Yeah.
So is Kendrick in the R1? Is Kendrick Market, is that still considered R1?
It's in the B1, I think.
It's in the B1, the same zone as this building.
Okay.
But what is the building R's zone next to that property?
Next to Kindred?
Also
Is it
R1.
Also R1. Okay.
Everything's R1 except for the B1 here.
Yes, correct.
But does Kindred really have a bunch of apartments upstairs?
Yes, my friend in college lived up there. So they've
That
been there.
seems strange that we wouldn't have known about that.
They've been there for at least 18 years.
A really nice apartment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the entrance is on the side of the building. So if you go around the side, you see like almost a fire escape.
Yeah.
The entrance and two upstairs. And then you walk into a hallway. I can't remember how many apartments there are, but I know there's at least 4, if not 6, up on top of that building.
So that's just been like that all along.
It's been there like since I've been in school. Since I graduated. Okay. So it's been there for a while.
We don't know if the code changed since then or what, but
that was exactly 20 years ago when I graduated. So I know it's been here around that amount of time.
Alrighty. Any other questions, comments, any rebuttal from the appellant? Last words?
The only other thing I would like to add, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Sharon. Just as a concept, I would like to bring about this board, because obviously we interact quite a bit here over the last few years. There's an association, strongtowns.org, that published an article entitled Localizing Affordable Housing. And I'd like to quote point number 3 from this specific article, because it's a good discussion point, not only for this particular application, but just in general. And it's entitled Unlocking Incremental Growth in Housing Supply. There's a more macro problem here which shouldn't be ignored. Why does demand for subsidized housing so badly outpace the supply of subsidy dollars? Why is the market in many parts of the country failing to meet the housing needs of a large segment of population? A big reason has to be that we've choked off many of the avenues for housing supply to grow organically to meet demand. It used to be that neighborhoods in high demand would gradually intensify in land use over time. Duplexes and triplexes would replace single-family homes. Small apartment buildings would go up on individual lots. But a whole swath of these missing middle housing types have been zoned out of most American neighborhoods. The article obviously goes on to address many issues, but I thought that particular section needed to be said just in a general discussion, because as we know, there is a lack of quality housing within this community, and that is what we are trying to provide.
Well, the article speaks for itself, and we have to adjust it to our own community and see what the zones in Athens are. And I don't really agree that there is no quality housing in Athens. There is plenty of it, is it? I mean, there is quite a bit of a quality housing in Athens for rentals. So
I think what we constantly see on this board, Mr. Montel, is people look around some of the neighborhoods that have been rentals for a long time, and they say to themselves, man, I'm so glad I don't live near that, and they're worried about the parties. Palmer Place, if you've seen that place when it's Partiesville, it's just, I wouldn't want to live near there. So it's kind of what we're up against with these people who live right next to your proposed property. And I think that's probably mainly what they're afraid of.
Well, I suppose there's a market for different group of people who want to live different locations or places. My concern with this property is that aside, we haven't even talked this set side and this setbacks yet. There's quite a bit of a variances involved in here besides the setback, number of units, and so on, and testimony from the neighbors. So we're just going to have to probably vote on it. Anything else? Any questions? Any comments before we close the floor to discussions?
I guess I do have a question.
Sure.
And this is with reference to what everyone's just been talking about, so I apologize for that. But I think that I have already forgotten what the name of the owner of the corner property on State in Madison, that development, that was being pushed. Sorry, Diversified. Okay, thanks. That was definitely being promoted as providing affordable housing, maybe for professionals or whatever. And although it seems like a smaller number of people. I don't know how many units it has. So for the idea for these 8 units is that they're affordable, they're aimed at young professional or retired persons and non-student oriented, but surely there are discrimination laws in place that would prevent you from insisting that no student could sign a lease there.
Exactly. We're not going to go against any state, local, or federal guidelines in regards to housing. But what we can do is orient our properties, one, based upon quality, and 2, based upon expectations of tenants in regards to how we screen and speak to our tenants in regards to what we expect. And we create high expectations with our rentals. I would encourage anyone that's interested in understanding our business aspect and the direction that we go to visit our website and see the quality of housing that we provide to this community. What we provide, I believe, is very positive and not a detriment. I'm actually kind of surprised at the response from some of the comments from this board and also the community members. I'm not sure they fully understand what we're providing. We're investing a lot of money into this community to increase what I believe is a a wonderful lifestyle and also a wonderful place to live. And the intent is for the betterment of the community, or else we would not propose this this project or any others that we present to the city, whether they require a variance or not.
Okay, speaking for myself, and this may apply to other board members too, the comments that may be surprising you are probably based on these letters, because we do get a lot of concerned letters from neighbors, and they do seem to be expressing some anxiety about the possibility of having difficult neighbors. So that's something we're pretty familiar with, and that would probably be why most of us are addressing that question.
You know, and that's completely understandable, and I think it needs to be discussed in this forum. Unfortunately, none of those property owners reached out directly to me, and I would have been more than happy to address any and speak of their concerns, as I did with Mr. Leatherwood. What I would like to emphasize is the fact that there is not a single business owner in that B1 neighborhood that is in opposition or has presented opposition to this forum. And I believe that's extremely important to speak to, because as we increase the population density within our community, it is to the benefit of our neighborhood. It is to the benefit of the city from an income point of view. There are a lot of positive aspects for increasing our population density. And I believe this is one opportunity that we can provide through private development and not through a subsidized development to increase that population density and to better our local community.
I just want to add that I agree with Ms. Carson, and I want to add that obviously there is some financial incentive is involved here, and the board does not consider that at all. We don't, we are not concerned with that. We are concerned with the property itself and the variance that goes with it forever. And if there are any other housing issues in Athens, it could be addressed in a way that kind of complies with the code. So that's my 2 cents.
I have a question about the rear setback. So with the alley, it says 5 feet where 30 feet is required. The alley is how much, Mr. Riggs? How many feet?
I think I think it's a 10-foot alley. I'd have to double check that and see. Okay. Now, of course, I'll just add a little bit more here. This building meets all the setbacks as a business zone, but when because of the bulk controls, when you change that use, you have to fall back to the setbacks of an R1 zone. So even though this is in a B1 zone, the code says you have to follow the setbacks for an R1 zone because that's the abutting zone.
Mr. Riggs,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
Is there anything about the telephone poles there in the alley? So they're so bent that if you went straight up from that building and I stood on the side, you went up straight, you'd hit the high tension wire for sure. I don't know if that's...
It's not a very big alley.
Yeah, it's very...
Mr. Riggs, I don't remember whether B1 is also requires or prevents having a residential on the first floor like B3, or is it
B1
allowed?
does not. Yes, does not.
Okay. All right.
If I can add here a little bit too, I think if you start looking at the, I'm going to lose my thought. Hold on a second. The setbacks. If you look at those setbacks and apply them to any house in the entire zone, B1 zone, I'm looking at the air photo and the parcel boundaries overlaid, not a single house or structure in this B1 zone would meet those setbacks. None of them. So, I think that the setbacks really isn't a concern here, ultimately.
Yeah, and the footprint is not changing anyway, so.
Right.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
This is probably none of my business, but I wonder if was any thought given to putting a business in this property instead of, business plus a bunch of residences?
So it's a very good question. When we acquire properties, we look obviously at multiple avenues. So the purpose of this, what we're proposing, is to create a sustainable development. Currently, what we have is a large vacant commercial space, and our primary concern is to have a sustainable development. From our point of view, I understand the board doesn't consider monetary concerns, but from our point of view, in order a mixed-use development is a positive attribute for us on a investment side. So if we have vacancies on the commercial side, the residential side helps sustain that. If we have vacancies on the residential side, the commercial side helps sustain the property itself. What I will tell you is we have properties that are commercial explicitly. And the struggle with those is to find consistent tenants. And there are not a lot of tenants that would need the size of structure that on the commercial first floor in Athens, Ohio. The commercial tenant pool is extremely small, and it doesn't, from a business point of view, be a viable use to have such a large commercial first floor. I hope I answered your question.
That does answer my question, and it does raise an issue, a problem that we granted some kind of variance to the property on the corner of Grosvenor and Carpenter or Stimson. I don't know which it is there. And years ago, and the first floor of it has stood empty ever since, with apartments atop it. So that is frustrating. That there aren't tenants for these places. Yeah.
It is, but it's also trying to create a sustainable development model, and I think the city should look at that in that respect, because if we want to have financial investment within our community, that concept needs to be understood and discussed in venues like this, and obviously on other platforms as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, but we are sort of the last resort. We're supposed to be sort of the last resort because we don't make we only can grant variances for individual properties. And some of this conversation you should probably be having with, city council or the planning commissioner, because you seem ambitious about making improvements, across the city. And that's something that would be certainly well regarded, but it's not something that we can really do anything about.
That's understandable. I appreciate your input. I really do.
Okay, thank you. Anything more? Any other comments? Now,
so the first floor, the intent with the first floor is to put handicap accessible units, and I think one of the positive parts, one of the many positive parts about this project is the having handicap accessible units with close to amenities like Kindred Market and the Athens Bread Shop and the Village Bakery, and allowing people with those type of disabilities being able to be within a block or so of those amenities for their convenience. That the rear property setback, I believe it currently is 5 feet per the survey that Kurt had, and that alley is 12 feet wide. So I don't know so really that rear property, when we were looking at that, it's a rear property, but it's also it's interesting because it's not up to another adjacent property. It's up to a public right of way. Mm-hmm. So if we have a 12-foot alley and then I believe it's a 5-foot at the rear of the property, so it's closer to 17 feet to the neighbor's property line. you guys had mentioned earlier, which I was going to bring up that the building footprint is not changing. And the other thing is that I think that one of the things I like about working with Kurt Montel is he alluded to it about wanting to make the place more attractive and better. And that building back there, the brick structure, the rear part. I mean, certainly that could be made to look differently at any time, but I think that the intent here would be to make it look more residential and fit in more with that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, sir. We're going to close the discussions from the floor, and anyone would like to entertain a motion?
I move to grant a variance from ACC 23-10-01 to allow a front setback of 8 feet where 25 feet is required, rear setback of 5 feet where 30 feet is required, right side setback of 4 inches where 8 feet is required, structure coverage of 40% where 30% is required, total lot coverage of 91% where 60% is required, and the variance from ACC 23.04.01 to allow 8 units where 1 unit is permitted. Proposed work would provide 3 residential units and 1 business space on the first floor. The second floor would provide 5 residential units.
Great job, John. Do we have a second? Okay, Rob, you seconded. Okay, let's go quickly over these exceptional circumstances. Are there any exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions that apply to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone? What is the exceptional circumstances in here?
For me, John, it's the fact that it abuts an R1 zone. It has, one could argue, the misfortune of abutting an R1 zone and therefore has to adhere, if it wants to have residential use, it has to adhere to those requirements.
Is this something that we could consider as that would motivate us to give the variance? Or is it just exceptional? It is what it is, being next to an R zone, that's just the nature of it. There's a lot of other ones. What is exceptional on this piece of property? A lot of other properties are next to an R1 zone, right? In B1?
Many are, but many aren't.
Okay. Practical.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that note, I take into Mr. Montel's previous work of his other buildings here that I see in the neighborhood, and they're exceptional. They are really great. That, along with the ADA approved housing, I think is something to be said for that. Okay,
like I said, we're trying to find reasons that it would justify granting the variance without which the property could not be utilized. In this case, I think the property could be utilized. And in some cases, if we didn't grant the variance, the property would have been unused. And so what is the practical difficulty and undue hardship? Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, the literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes.
So I think here in this situation that if the variance isn't granted, that there wouldn't be a reasonable return on the investment in the property.
Yeah, but we don't care about that. Yeah, that's not a part that we need.
State court, Duncan versus Middlefield, that was one of the criteria specifically called out for Board of Zoning Appeals to look at, is whether or not the property in question will yield a reasonable return.
in the city of Athens, as far as I know, and my members could verify, we do not consider financial cases situation. If I know that everybody would like to benefit from that, but that is not that cannot be a part of our discussion as a reason for giving variance.
So then, didn't you just mention that if it wasn't developed, it could just sit there idle, and that wouldn't be in the interest?
No, this property has been used in the past. It could be utilized, as Ms. Carson asked. It could be a business. It could be utilized as it is. It may not create as much profit for the owner, and that's not the issue that we can discuss. Okay, preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and in the same vicinity.
I think just the pointing out the Kindred Market there is 2 buildings away, same exact profile they're looking for, and that would be pretty much the same.
Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. I can just refer to the one letter and one email we received that they had some concern about the development of this project. Not being of a general nature. Response, yes, no?
No, not of a general nature.
I would say no. Okay. Are we ready to vote? Yes. Let's go with Mr. Goodekunst.
I always have to go first.
You want to go last? Yes.
No. Yes, I could.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Carson?
I feel bad about it, but I vote no.
Okay. Kay?
I vote yes.
And then Mr. Dulac?
I vote yes.
Okay. I vote no as well. So you have the variance 3-2 votes. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, let's move on to disposition of minutes from April 13, 2021 meeting. The minutes was very, very good. Thank you, Ms. Yake. There was a couple of minor typos that once that is changed, I guess it was like foot changed to feet. With that correction, do we have a motion to accept the minutes of April 13?
So moved.
Okay.
Lisa was all second.
Okay, Lisa made the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposition? No, so the minutes are approved. And there's nothing else to discuss, so we're going to adjourn. The meeting is adjourned.